Hello and welcome to Not Your Mother's Midlife Crisis. I'm Chris, and here's my fabulous co-host, Chris.
Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
We're doing good this week, aren't we? Got
All
a little
right.
bit of snow.
Yes. Surviving the cold weather.
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit more than expected.
Yes.
Like a foot and a half more.
Yes.
Wasn't quite planning for that. So,
Yeah. Getting our workout in, shoveling out.
yes.
Yes.
All right.
I know, but we are pleased to welcome a fellow Jersey girl, Cheryl Dillon, to you today. She's a certified life coach and the founder of the Funderful Experiences, where she helps guide women shape their midlife to feel vibrant, joyful, and intentional. So welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Always good to be in the presence of other Jersey girls. And I heard about your weather. And so I remember those days. I hope that you didn't hurt your back shoveling and are staying nice and warm and have good snacks in the house.
Yes, these snacks are very important. But Cheryl, I also want to mention that you're the co-founder of Equitable Mediation Services, and you help other people navigate through divorce with compassion and respect. We're really grateful that you've shared your time with us here all the way from California.
Yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
So welcome. What led you to become a divorce coach? What were your experiences that took you on that path?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's kind of like a windy journey. I myself went through a divorce in the early 2000s, and I used mediation. And at the time, I wasn't aware of mediation even as an option. I was living in New Jersey at the time. I had a really good girlfriend that I confided in, and she said, "Why are you going to spend all that money with the lawyers? Why don't you just mediate?" And I remembered saying, "What's that?" And, certainly the internet wasn't what it is today. So there wasn't a lot of information. And it's not like you're announcing to the world that you're getting a divorce. But my friend had a referral, and I called that person. And luckily, my now ex-husband was willing to go that route. We were aligned in terms of wanting to keep things peaceful, not blow up the bank accounts. So we mediated our divorce. And, I was able to do a lot of inner work, a lot of therapy and self-help books and reflection. And, I healed and I moved forward. And then I met other women who went through litigated divorces, and they had completely different stories to share. And it was really like years long, devastating financially. It destroyed the relationship with the children. I mean, it was just a big mess. And so all along, I thought, why doesn't everybody mediate? And so that was, back in the early 2000s, I hadn't even, of course, known or met my now husband, Joe. We've been married 21 years last week, and apparently I got it right the second time. But, Joe's parents went through a terrible divorce when he was a kid, and it was the kind that I was just describing, where it really destroyed the family. And so he knows certainly the consequences of what happens to children in those situations. So the two of us each had personal experiences with divorce, different, but certainly, in the divorce realm. Then flash forward a whole bunch of years, we got married, both working in corporate environments, big pharma, because that's New Jersey. At the time, we were really looking to be entrepreneurs. We wanted to do something different, get out of that, corporate wasn't really our thing. And my husband had a lunch with my mother's friend, and she was a mediator for police unions. And he was so interested in it. He had all the skills already: finance, negotiation, contract negotiation. He had all the fundamental skills to be a mediator, but again, had no idea that that was even a thing, but his skills translated. And so it was his idea first to start Equitable. I'm a co-founder, but when we first started the company, I was still in corporate supporting us while he could grow the business. And then a couple of years later, I said, I don't want to be in corporate anymore either. And I've helped us kind of get the business off the ground. And now I'd like to do something that's very meaningful for me. And I wanted to go and become a life coach. And during that training, they tell you, if you're everything to everybody, you're nothing to nobody. And so even though your life coaching skills can apply to all kinds of different people, situations, they said, pick a niche. And to me, it seemed like the most meaningful niche was to be a divorce coach. And so, we already had Equitable Mediation that had formed, it was a couple years old. I had this personal experience with divorce. I knew of what I spoke. I really felt like I could help people avoid, what my husband's, family went through, what some friends went through. And so it all just really lined up. couldn't predict it forward, but looking back, all the dots connected. And that, I'm sorry, that's such a long answer. That's how it happened. So it wasn't, I just woke up one day. It was a whole bunch of things that were happening and it all made sense after.
It's very interesting where life takes you. The journey is long, but you do get there.
Yeah.
So what are the benefits to having a divorce coach like yourself?
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits. If you think about a divorce, it is a legal event, but there's a lot of emotions entangled there, and it's a big identity transition. So first of all, no one goes to college to learn how to go through a divorce. This is something that no one is ever faced with, never thinks they're going to be facing. And then when it happens, there's like no guidebook, what to do or how to get through it. And emotions are absolutely the number one factor that can make things go sideways. And, it's when anger and resentment and fear, all these things, they're all normal, but they can really derail the negotiations and they can cause the divorce to be very adversarial. And so there are different kinds of divorce coaches. Some of them help people who are already in adversarial litigated divorce situations. Maybe they be sitting with their client and kind of coaching them on maybe what to say or how to keep their composure. The kind of divorce coaching that I do is really to augment our mediation services. And so if one or both of the spouses is feeling very overwhelmed or they're having difficulty communicating with each other, or there's something that's blocking them from being able to process what's happening and make sound, clear decisions, they can work with me throughout the mediation for emotional support. So, what I'm doing is not, all divorce coaches don't do that. They each kind of have their own, what their specialty is. But for me, I feel like, when you have a divorce coach or when you're tending to your emotions, not only can you communicate more effectively with your soon-to-be ex-spouse, which for you think about divorce, that's really strained in a lot of situations and it's normal, but you don't want it to, hinder moving forward. It can help somebody stay focused on their goal instead of knee-jerk short-term reactions, right? This person really got under my skin and I'm going to show him. It's like you want cool heads prevail. So it can help you have some strategies to keep your cool. It can help you rebuild your confidence at a time where you're feeling so down on yourself and maybe like a failure or just defeated. So, and then coaching can also help to give you a roadmap for how to prepare for a divorce. Because again, there are financial things you're going to want to prepare. There's emotional preparations. You're going to want to make sure that the kids are okay and that you're kind of saying and doing the right things to keep this as peaceful as possible. And I feel like when people are supported emotionally, overall, they're just going to make better financial decisions, legal decisions, co-parenting decisions. So it can be very useful to have that kind of support.
That's great. I would imagine some people want to keep you around after the divorce, to keep you help mediating almost like a therapist.
It's interesting because, again, the kind of coaching I do, the coaching relationship ends at the end of mediation. It's, looking back on it, I think I didn't have a coach. I didn't know that there were coaches at the time. Maybe there were or weren't. I had a therapist. And I did see that person for a bit after my divorce as I was kind of healing and processing. But as far as coaching goes, I have some wonderful clients. They never want to see or talk to me again. And, it doesn't hurt my feelings. It's a reminder of a really painful time in life. I think that there are 2 former clients that have actually become friends. And this is a confidential process and you don't want either spouse to feel like there's a bias, I'm neutral. So, we keep a distance for years. But then there were a couple of people that lived not too far away and we had such a great rapport and we really shared energy. And they said, could we be friends after? So we waited a couple of years and made sure it was okay with the ex. But, for the most part, people don't want the reminder of this painful time in their lives. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've all seen the statistics about the increase in divorce over the age of 50. They're referring to it as gray divorce.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on why that's on the rise?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it seems to be, very common subject, these past couple of years. I think that there's a couple of things at play. First of all, people are living longer and healthier lives overall. And it really changes how they view their decades ahead. And so a lot of times when people reach midlife, they ask themselves, how do I want my next 20 or 30 years to be, what I want my life to be like? There are a lot of people that stay together unhappily in a marriage because they believe it's better for the children. And that's a whole different conversation for a whole different day, whether or not that's true. It can be for some people, for others, it's not. But, a lot of people, whether it's religious beliefs or values that they have, they believe we have to stay together for the kids. So they stay together unhappily for so many years. And then when the children are grown and they're empty nesters now, they can kind of say, okay, well, I've done my job and now it's my time. Now I want to be happy and I'm going to make decisions that are good for me. Some other things that are happening, there's a lot of financial independence among women. There's a lot of high earning women who have careers. Not like the olden days, they don't need to depend on a husband for financial support. So I think a lot of people are emphasizing now personal fulfillment, their own emotional well-being. So these gray divorces, oftentimes, they're not impulsive. It's the result of so many years of disconnection that are now finally being acknowledged.
Okay.
That's a very good answer. That's
thank
good
you.
clarification.
Yeah.
Well, then,
Yeah.
other than the gray period, what are some issues that you see that women particularly have issues with navigating a divorce?
Well, the others, of course, every divorce is unique, but there are some common challenges that women face, and men face these too. One is emotional overload. Again, divorce is so emotional. Your marriage is ending. There's so many emotions that go along with that. Whether there was, an infidelity, if there's anger, resentment, extreme grief, sadness, fear of the unknown, all of these things are normal. But you need to be able to make clear decisions, financial decisions. So when you're flooded with emotions, that can be difficult, right? To separate the emotions from these, clear decisions that need to be made for your future. Something else is, keep talking about fear about your future stability. Because if you think about it, people in long marriages, you imagine your life. You see your life already, how it's going to unfold. I'm going to grow old with this person. We've accumulated this money for retirement. We're going to be comfortable in our retirement. Here's what we're going to be doing, traveling or, whatever. And all of a sudden now you have this life event that upends what you thought your life was going to be like. And so there's a lot of fear about future stability, primarily financial stability moving forward. There is, a loss of identity. You're a wife, a mother, a sister, a friend, like many of us, who we are, our identity, and, multiple identities, but a wife, a spouse, a partner, you're losing that identity in a divorce, right? And so, especially if a lot of your life has centered around family roles, I identify as being a mom, or I identify as being a dutiful wife. These identities are now, they're going away. And so there's a lot of fear and confusion, about this loss of identity.
Sure.
Something else is information imbalance, especially if one spouse historically managed the household finances. And, more and more these days, I'm talking to people where even if one spouse is the primary breadwinner, the other spouse manages paying the bills, running the house. So it's not like, again, the olden days where the husband makes the money, the husband has control of everything, the husband pays the bills, the wife is just kind of has no clue. That happens sometimes, but it's not so common anymore. But if one spouse historically managed the household finances and the other spouse trusted, right? We're a team. I trust you. Bills are getting paid. I trust you. There's money in the bank account. Now in a divorce, that person can feel like they're behind the eight ball and they don't have that information. They're afraid, how am I going to find out what we even own, what we even owe? So a lot of times, women are managing grief, a lot of uncertainty, and logistics all at the same time. And that makes guidance and education really important.
That's a lot of insecurity. That's a lot
sure
of
is.
things to feel insecure about.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I know that we've covered a lot in it with your that answer, but are there three main things a woman should be mindful of when experiencing a divorce?
Yeah, that's a great question. Three things. I probably could come up with 10 things. One is slowing down major decisions. Sometimes, and I've heard this often, the decision is made to divorce. All of a sudden, somebody's going into logistics. What we're going to do with the house, what we're going to do with the bank account. It can be a lot coming at you if you're the recipient of that, being pressured into making these decisions without, A, being educated, and B, being able to emotionally process and be clear about your thinking and what you're going to be deciding. So sometimes a spouse really can be pressuring, so we'll just say, husband, wife, it could be wife, wife, but, the decision is made and now all of a sudden someone's going right into logistics. And so if the woman is not the one doing that, she can feel very pressured to agree to things that she has not yet had the opportunity to become equipped to discuss. And, sometimes her family or her friends are giving her advice on what she should do. That's common. Everybody's got an opinion, right? And you should take him to the cleaners, or you should, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you're listening to that, it's not helpful. Even though the people dispensing this advice might think they're being helpful, they aren't, especially if they don't work in a divorce profession. Oftentimes they have no idea what they're talking about. And all they're doing is stirring the pot and, getting you very worried, nervous, pressured into taking actions you normally in your integrity wouldn't take, getting an aggressive lawyer or hiding money. Like it gets really crazy. And so I think fear can really lead to rushed or imbalanced agreements that have long-term consequences. So that would be number one, is to slow down the major decisions. You need the time to have the clarity so that you can think about the future and think according to your intuition, right? And make these good decisions. And the second thing is to understand your full financial picture. Knowledge oftentimes reduces anxiety and it prevents a lot of costly mistakes. And then, let's see, third, it would be think big picture, right? Right now, you're so consumed, you're focusing on the divorce as the event. It's kind of like focusing on the wedding when you should be focusing on your marriage and your life together, right? The wedding is a wonderful time, but it's one event. You don't want to be bridezilla. You want to think about the big picture, your marriage. In this situation, try to think beyond the divorce itself. It's hard, but you want to think big picture. The goal isn't just about ending the marriage. It's about creating a sustainable next chapter for everybody involved, including your children, if you have them. And even if the kids are adults, don't think it doesn't affect them. Adult children are affected more by divorce than young children. It's really we always say, like, pull up, Maverick, look at the big picture and make decisions that are more strategic, that are going to get you to your goals for the future.
Okay. So, I think you hit on it a little bit too, but so what are some financial mistakes that you see people make, even before the divorce is happening or during and after?
There's some interesting, we've been doing this 18 years, so there are lots of things that we see happening. I think one thing is, as I said before, right, agreeing to settlements without fully understanding all your assets, your retirement accounts, if you have them, other non-traditional income sources like stock options or RSUs or these variable bonuses that often people, they're so different every year. You want to also fully understand the tax consequences of certain financial decisions. Oftentimes, people might think, oh, well, we want a 50-50 outcome, or we want something fair, and they think they're going to cut everything down the middle, or one person's going to have the house and the other person's going to have, something else instead. But there could be tax implications where at the end of the day, what might look fair on paper really isn't. And so you want to take the time to fully understand your financial picture and the implications before you start making decisions. Sometimes, stereotypically, again, it's not always the women, but stereotypically, maybe the woman wants to keep the family home without taking the time to evaluate the affordability long term. That sometimes houses need a roof, or they need a new furnace, or they need, dot, dot, dot. And these are big expenses. So even if she's budgeting and thinks she can swing a mortgage, it's anticipating these other capital expenses that could just right. So it's one thing to want to keep the kids in the house, like Joe's mom. That was her thing. She wanted to keep him in the house. She was really like firmly rooted in that belief. She worked 3 jobs. He barely saw her. He was doing all kinds of chores at home at a young age when a child shouldn't have been doing that stuff. And, but again, her belief of keep the kid in the house without really evaluating other things that would be impacted by a decision like that. And sometimes a better decision might be to move or downsize so that you aren't stretched financially, or you can spend more time with the children. You don't have to have 3 jobs, So another thing is underestimating your post-divorce living expenses. And so, again, these costs, when you divorce, the multi-car discount for your car insurance, that goes away. So that's going to change. If you are on a family plan for your cell phone, that's going to go away. Things are going to change. So you really want to take the time to understand what you're going to need to live on, right? How you're going to meet your financial obligations post-divorce, and know those things before you start negotiating. And then one other thing I would say is making emotionally driven financial concessions just to get the divorce over with. I don't know if you guys can relate, but oftentimes in a relationship, one person is maybe more, I'll say, assertive instead of aggressive. They're louder. They tend to get their way. Maybe they throw a little temper tantrum. There's a dynamic that they do that helps them get their needs met. And maybe the other person just either doesn't care. It's not a big enough deal for them to speak up about it, or they can't just be in the presence of this, like, carrying on. So they're like, okay, fine. You choose what we're going to have for dinner, or you choose the vacation, or, they don't want to get involved with the conflict. And so they're maybe more often to give in and not speak up for their own needs. And you certainly don't want to do that in a divorce. You don't want to just give in order for the divorce to be over. You really want to have a good understanding of what's at stake, because if you do that, the only person you're going to be angry at afterwards is yourself, that you didn't speak up. And so those are some. There's more, but you asked me just for a couple.
That's good. Yep. Thank you.
And so, our audience, or
Sure.
big part of our audience is the perimenopause, menopause at that part of their life.
Yeah.
Do you see if there's any effect that menopause has either for the male or the female in divorce?
You mean, just to clarify, are you asking if those things contribute to the decision to get a divorce?
Yes.
Huh. I don't think anybody ever asked me that question before. That's so interesting. Huh. Well, I'm not personally aware of people openly saying that to me. However, having gone through that lovely time in life, I can say, like, there's so much that changes in your sleep and your mood and your body and your self-esteem. And men just don't understand all that stuff. And so I could imagine that first of all, if you're not sleeping, you're maybe getting crankier. It's harder for you to be happy because you really are being affected, right? Physiologically, physically, by this lack of sleep. I remember, when I was going through that part of time, I think it was like 2 years. If I got one good night's sleep, it would be a miracle. And so when you're sleep deprived, you're not at your best, right? And if you're really struggling with some of these menopausal symptoms, you're not at your best. If your spouse doesn't understand and doesn't have empathy, that perhaps could create what's wrong with you, what's your problem, without really fully understanding that this is a real thing. And so really that's what I would think of. No one has ever said we're getting a divorce because of that. But I know that these are, having lived through it, there are some real things that are happening for people. And if their spouse doesn't have empathy or compassion and love and patience, that could certainly create some issues.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. We've talked about that
Yeah.
a little bit, how you're not being heard from your doctor. Your doctor is telling you there's nothing wrong with you. You're just having normal aging. So you feel unheard and unseen. And then if you go back to your spouse and you say the doctor says that everything's normal, then they're like, well, it's just you that changed. And if you don't have that communication, that's where I think that could play a part. So it's a
100%.
good breakdown.
Yeah.
What does it look like when you're going through mediation, like from start to finish? And is it something that I could have, not I, but if someone could have a mediator, could use you and they live in California or they live in New Jersey and you live in California?
Yes. So the answer to that question is yes. We practice in 6 different states. New Jersey, obviously, is where Equitable Mediation was formed. That's where we're both born and raised. We practice in New Jersey. We've been practicing there the whole 18 years. We also practice in New York and Pennsylvania. And we lived in Chicago for some years. We practice in Illinois. We practice in California and Washington State. Mediation is an unregulated profession. There's no bar associated for mediators, which means it's a wonderful decision for a couple to choose to use mediation, but you really have to discern who you're going to work with. Because what you find out there are some lawyers, litigators who also say they mediate for, part of the time. There's financial professionals, mental health professionals, and then there's every other Tom, Dick, and Harry who decides they're going to be a mediator. So you really want to make sure that you're hiring someone who is professionally trained, competent, ethical, and knows how to be a neutral third-party mediator, because that's a whole different skill set than lawyering, being a mediator. In terms of, so people can work with us if they live in any of those states. All of our mediations are virtual on Zoom. We've been doing that since 2011, so well before the pandemic. It's convenient, and it's sometimes uncomfortable to be in the same room as your soon-to-be ex-spouse, so it kind of puts a little buffer there. And we've had mediations where each spouse is living in a different state. And we've had situations where one spouse is in New Jersey and the other one is in Italy. So we've been able, with virtual, to be able to support a much broader population of couples, and it's been gratifying. So Joe's my husband, the mediator. He has carefully chosen these states to make sure that he fully understands their child support guidelines, whether or not they have an alimony calculator, how are assets, what are the principle on asset division, is it community property or equitable distribution? So every state is a little bit different, and you just want to make sure that you're working with a mediator that is up to speed on those nuances, because it will make a big difference in your agreement. In terms of, what mediation looks like, the first thing is it's a voluntary process. So both spouses need to be willing to mediate. No one can force anybody into mediation. Although in New Jersey, the first steps of a litigated divorce, there is a court-appointed mediation where the couple is forced to work with a mediator. Oftentimes, the couple is already adversarial, and I don't know how successful those mediations go. It's already kind of a contentious process. We're private mediators. People work with us instead of all of that. So the mediator is a neutral third party. He doesn't take sides. He isn't going to give any legal advice. No one will be pressured into agreeing to anything they're not comfortable with. And typically what will happen is the couple is coming to an agreement out of court. It's a confidential process. And in mediation, goals will be identified, priorities, a lot of financial information will be gathered and shared. The couple, with the help of the mediator, will negotiate their parenting plan, child support, spousal support, division of assets and liabilities. And then there are also in mediation the flexibility to do some life issues, things that there's not necessarily a law around, but just like one example, sometimes, for whatever reason, maybe there's an alcoholism issue, the couple, there's some rules and guidelines, rules of the road that they want to put in place to make sure that the spouse who has an alcohol issue isn't drinking when it's their parenting time. So these are like life issues, and there's a whole bunch of them. And so all of these issues are discussed, negotiated, and then the goal is mutually agreed upon solutions. The mediator will bring options to the table so the couple doesn't have to have it all figured out. He will look at their financial situation, create options, encourage them to create options. It's very transparent. All 3 people, the mediator and the 2 spouses, are always present for the sessions at the same time. There's no secrets. And it's a respectful way to resolve all of these issues required for divorce without the involvement of lawyers, courts, the fight. Not everybody is, holding hands and singing songs together. There is conflict, but there has to still be that willingness to work together, be transparent with your financial situation, and cooperate with each other for the shared interest, which is often, a fair outcome for both of them, great co-parenting relationship with their children. They both want to be on roughly equal footing moving forward. So these are the shared interests. And if couples are willing to work together, the mediator can help them achieve those things.
That sounds like the best option of a bad situation. It really does.
Yeah, I mean, divorce, it's interesting too. A lot of people, I remember when I was going through a divorce, people be like, oh, I'm so sorry, and because they didn't know what to say and it's so sad. It is a sad event, but I have to say, I was so relieved to be going through that divorce. I didn't need anybody feeling sorry for me and, oh, woe is me. It had taken me 2 years to make that decision. So it was a very clear decision. It wasn't a snap thing. And by the time the decision was made, I felt at peace about it. It still was sad and painful, but it doesn't have to be a doom and gloom. Some relationships are not meant to go until the people die, and it doesn't diminish a happy marriage. Maybe the couple had a wonderful marriage for the first however many years, and they realize that they're better as roommates, or, they have conflicting values now, or they want different things out of life, or, ... So it's such a personal experience. But I do believe that if they're willing, mediation is absolutely the best way for them to not get stuck in this event and to be able to heal and move forward, hopefully preserve their financial resources, get back on their feet, and move on to be, great co-parents to the kids and have happy chapter 2.
That's good. I like it.
So with your coaching, what does rebuilding your identity look like in midlife?
Well, I think, rebuilding identity, right? That always starts with checking in with, who am I, right? Who am I now? This identity has been shed. I'm not this person's wife anymore. And so who am I? What do I want? What's important to me now? How do I want my next chapter to look? And how can I begin to design it? So a lot of women spend years prioritizing partnership or their family roles. And divorce creates a really good opportunity, sometimes unexpectedly, to reconnect with their personal values, their interests, their goals. It can involve, redefining their own independence. Maybe they were really reliant on their spouse. Maybe they forgot how to write a check, or they've been out of the workforce. Maybe they were in the workforce, out of the workforce. They don't interact with adults maybe anymore, or they've lost themselves a little bit, and some of them are angry about it, but some of them say, okay, now I'm going to shake that off and I'm going to be independent again. For some of them, it's really rebuilding confidence or exploring new social connections. Sometimes in a marriage, you might have things that you enjoy doing and your spouse doesn't. And so you just never do them, I just talk about Joe. He doesn't like going on boats. I love going on boats, and it's not that I'm not allowed. I'm not going to go on a boat by myself, so I might not think to do it. But when you're reinventing yourself, you could say, well, I'm going to go on a boat, or I'm going to take up painting, or I'm going to, travel more, or whatever is very important to you that you might have put aside while you were caregiving or, spousing, or doing those things. It's really, creating a vision for the next chapter of your life. And even though divorce is really difficult, many people, myself included, ultimately will describe it as a turning point toward living more authentically, having more fulfillment. I know for me, after my divorce, as I said, I went to therapy. I read a ton of self-help books. I was determined to not repeat that relationship with someone else, right? Because oftentimes we just new partner, same patterns. And so I really wanted to break that. I was willing to take responsibility instead of blaming my ex. What was my role in this? How did I attract a partner like this? And so it really gave me an opportunity to not jump into something else right away, to figure out who am I, change some of my patterns, figure out what my real values are and what my rules are, right? What are my non-negotiables, moving forward. And then when I was ready, to attract a partner who mirrored those things back to me.
That's really nice.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
So would you say the mediation and coaching way, is it just more empathetic, or is it also more affordable?
It's both. I mean, certainly, I don't know if you have been through a divorce or you know anyone who's been through a divorce, but let me give you an example in terms of the cost. Of course, there's a giant spectrum. You can do what we call a drive-through divorce. There's these online things now, kind of like TurboTax, right, where you enter all your stuff, you answer your questions, it spits out a divorce agreement. You could tell how excited I am about those because
Never heard of it.
I would never. I personally, no
Yeah.
matter how complicated or simple I think my situation is, I would never do that. There's too much at stake and too many places where you can make mistakes.
Go wrong. Yeah.
And oftentimes that cheap solution wound up costing you multiples to try to fix it, or if you can ever fix it in the first place. So, but you have mediation, there's collaborative divorce, there's litigated divorce, which is the nuclear option. And that even has a spectrum of pricing. I spoke with somebody this week who told me her divorce has been going on since 2018. So first do the math on how many years her divorce has been happening. She spent over $100,000. I mean, she was a stay-at-home mom, so I don't know where's she getting this money from. And, now she had to take equity out of the house. She took equity out of her retirement. I mean, she's really in a bad situation. It took all this time. The children are in therapy. And so we're looking at like the nuclear option. These divorces, they can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and no one believes it until it's too late and it's happening to them. And so you really want to try to get your emotions in check and choose a more peaceful option. And that's really where mediation comes in. It's not a cheap divorce, but it's absolutely more affordable than what I just described in a big way. And also, it's better to preserve the money in your bank account, and it's better for your children. It's better for you. And so working with one neutral mediator instead of each of you hiring your own separate lawyers, right? Already you're going to have a cost savings there. Most people think all they'll pay is the retainer for the attorney, and that is not correct. That's the shake hands and say hello. And so again, divorce is incredibly expensive. It goes from expensive to crazily expensive. And so, I of course believe that mediation, it's a fraction of all of that. And it's certainly, a better option for all kinds of reasons, cost, peaceful.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, Cheryl, we covered a lot of information. So is there anything you think we missed that our listeners should know about?
If they are interested to learn more, we do have a very robust website. We've been practicing for 18 years. We have a very high case resolution rate, which I know we didn't talk about, but that's another thing, right? So it's great to find a mediator, and you want to ask that prospective mediator what their case resolution rate is. An average mediator is going to have a 70% case resolution rate, meaning 70% of the couples that come mediate with that person reach an agreement there in mediation and avoid court and all the litigation. Ours is 98%. And so
Congrats.
Year after year, again, and it's not all about us. We absolutely have a sound process. My partner is a competent, experienced mediator. It's all he does. It's not a side gig, right? He's full-time divorce mediator. He's got a finance background. Most of these things come down to money. But really, if the couple is willing to follow our process, do what we ask, stay engaged, we can help them resolve everything with us in mediation. So if they're in the beginning stages and would like to learn more, we have a learning center on our website. There are articles, videos, podcasts, you name it. We're all about helping people to get educated. We even have a couple of online courses to prepare for divorce. There are steps you're going to want to take before you even tell your spouse you want a divorce. There are things you're going to want to be thinking about and preparation you're going to want to make in the beginning, because a lot of that will really set the tone for how the rest of the process will unfold. So hopefully if we can be of help, we have there's a free info call with me. If somebody is just in the early stages and has a couple of questions, wants to know if mediation might work for them, when the couple is ready, they can book a consultation with my partner, Joe. And then in the meantime, there's a ton of information on our website to help answer questions and alleviate some of that fear and anxiety that often comes with a divorce.
Can you share that website with us now? And then we'll also list it in our show notes.
Absolutely. So it's long, and everybody always says meditation. It's mediation. It's equitable, like fair and equitable. Equitable Mediation.
Okay. We will be sure to include that in our show notes, as well as the phone number that you can provide to me. And how about any of your socials, or is your company on any social media that our listeners can follow?
Yes, I'm trying to think of what those are. And I'm happy to say, I never remember if it's like Equitable _ mediation or a dash mediation. So I promise to send that to you afterwards.
Okay.
To be, so Joe is on a lot of podcasts. He's been, we don't do a ton of posting on Facebook and Instagram. It's really not necessarily our target audience, is like scrolling through Instagram to see like, have a great divorce. And we're old school, we're all about like, old school tech, like read a blog article, watch a video on our website. But certainly we have some socials. I think the best source of information would be just directly on our website.
Okay. And what about for your Funderful Experiences?
Yeah, Funderful Experiences, same thing. I have socials. It is Funderful, so not wonderful, but fun. Funderful Experiences, and it's Funderful _ experiences.com. That is my midlife women's community. And that website is a little more joyful and more fun, but certainly people can come and learn more about that there. So I know I have two hats right now, the mediation and then the midlife women's community.
Great. We really appreciate, Cheryl, your time coming on here today. You've given our listeners a really broad spectrum of information, and I think also like hope. So if they're going through something difficult, hopefully you made it to where they realize that it doesn't have to be awful.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. It doesn't have to be this devastating doom and gloom. It ruins your life. It is absolutely a monumental life event. And there's all kinds of things wrapped up in it. But, it is possible to heal from it and not let it define you and not let it define the rest of your life. And I am proof of that. And, I'm happily married for 21 years. And I'm not saying every day is a picnic here, but
what marriage is.
It's a partnership. And so it's absolutely possible to move forward, even if you're moving forward and you don't want to get married again. I didn't want to get married again. This kind of just was, but the whole point is a divorce doesn't have to ruin your life. It doesn't have to ruin your children's lives. It will affect them, but they're going to be looking at you and how you're modeling it and what's happening for you. And there are plenty of wonderful families who have navigated through something like this and have come out the other side. And the kids have great relationship with both parents. The exes can be in the room together at the birthday parties and the weddings. It's really all the conscious choices that each person is making right from the very beginning.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much.
Good information.
Thank you both. It's been really wonderful conversation.
Good. Yeah. Good. I'm glad we were able to work out our tech problems. Thank you again for your patience. And we want to thank our affiliates, which is the Pelvic Floor Store, Patricia Drain, your gift is your niche, and underoutfit.com.
Yes. And thank you for everyone who downloads, shares, and orders our merch online. They will also be in the show notes. So continue to like and download.
Absolutely. And until next week, where we continue to seek answers for women's healthcare
and support one another.
Thank you so much.